to get back to my point, like Lafreniere has figured something out so far this year. I think the Rangers organization and Rangers fans are starting to be like, okay, this is looking more like the player that we thought we were drafting number one overall, and we're seeing that with Slav right now.
Yeah.
And so it's an encouraging sign. That Slavkovsky's there's a few things that Slavkovsky's really starting to figure out. Not producing like you would expect a number one overall pick to produce, but he's 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 reaching stages that suggest that uh, he could be a piece of that forward group we were talking about earlier. That's not variable. That's a more of a known quantity that you can say 2 3 years from now, and I'm not fully confident saying it yet, but I'm getting there. Where you say 2 3 years from now, Uri Slavkovsky is going to be a high end, if not superstar, but like a high end forward in the NHL,
Hmm.
and so
Um,
that would help for
there,
sure.
there, no doubt. Well, he's drafted first overall in his draft year. You have to hit on a player like that.
Yeah.
It's got otherwise. Take say he might not. He doesn't have to be as good as a number one pick from another year, but he's got to be one of the best players of his own crop, and he's got to
Hmm.
be an impact player on your team. That's what
Yeah.
I'm expecting, and I'm confident that it's going to happen. Just maybe a last question because there's one angle that we have not covered, and it's the draft picks, which the Canadians have had in large numbers for a few years now. And there's this
And
this
still have in upcoming
they still
years.
exactly yeah. So
Yeah.
so there's a listener who's asking us. He says, what is considered capacity in the Canadian system in terms of the number of prospects they can accommodate and develop? They have so many draft picks, it seems unlikely they could ever make use of them all. Uh, so the Canadians have averaged, I've calculated that since 2018, they've averaged 9.6 players selected per draft, which is a lot. You have
Mhm.
that one year, that have 2 years, but that's over, that's over the past five drafts. That's not six. So right now they own also 11 picks for the next draft and another 11 picks in 2025, and those in 2025 are actually higher quality picks than the ones from the next
Well, they have
this
two
upcoming
picks,
draft.
two picks in each of the first four rounds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's that you're really it's a good setup. So
Hmm.
I expect that they would package some of those draft picks to get more immediate assets. I don't expect them to draft 11 players in either of those drafts.
Hmm.
Um, but when you take the balance of the veterans who are set to become free agents, the guys like uh, Monahan, Pearson, but also those in Laval, the Maillet and guys like that. So all the UFAs in the organization, and you balance it out with all the junior age players who are likely to start their contract in the pros next year. So Reinbacher, but also Philip Michar.
Hmm.
That should bring the number of contracts
Owen Beck.
rough. Owen back. It
Hmm.
should bring the number of contracts to roughly 42 and 43. Obviously, that's before they add additional guys either via trade or on the market, but that's pretty much where you would be. So, but there'll be additional guys signed, but there's also don't forget that there among those prospects that there many have fallen in the cracks, right, since they were drafted, and there's only for next summer there's only Cedric Guindon, I think, and Alex Tuck who will be guys that the organization will say, oh, well, do we sign them or not?
Hmm.
So I don't think that they're in any danger of being too close, let's say, to the 50 contract limits. But overall, I think that there should not be any concern with the capacity of the Canadians system to integrate all of their younger players. Because some fall out of the map very quickly. There's some guys that can start in the CHL. Some are being given American League deals, like Harvey Pinard or Simoneau, guys like that, prior
Hmm.
to their entry level. So
Davidson right now in Laval.
that's a good point.
Yeah.
That's another one. So I don't think that the fact that they're having too many prospects, they're having too many draft picks, what they're going to do with all of that. The attrition almost it comes naturally. It's like when you have too many guys in Laval at the beginning of the season. Just wait a few weeks, and with all the injuries in Montreal, in Laval, everywhere, it trickles down naturally, and
Well,
that problem solves itself
yes,
easily.
yes, but there's a bigger issue. And I think this is kind of a good segue into our sort of Future Friday portion because we were going to talk about Laval. I had a chance to chat with Emil Heineman in Laval on Wednesday night after they lost their eighth straight game, and this is going to be my counter to what you're saying. And I think this is where I think the question is quite valid because it's not only a matter of contracts, it's not a matter of um, when you say capacity for prospects, it's do you have enough of a situation to put these prospects in the best position to properly develop and succeed? Um, I think if you ask some of the guys in Laval right now how things are going, you're not going to get a lot of positive answers. Emil Heineman definitely didn't have a lot of positive answers. The losing was weighing on him hard. It was very difficult for him to accept what was happening. He hasn't even been in the lineup for the entirety of this eight-game losing streak, which, the Laval's playing later this evening. So maybe by the time you listen to this, they've broken that eight-game losing streak. But still, the environment is heavy over there.
Yeah,
Um, just quickly on Heineman, I mean, he's coming back from an quote unquote upper body injury. I asked him if it was a concussion. He wouldn't comment on it, which was funny. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "I'm not going to comment on that." I was like, "Okay, gotcha."
fine.
So yeah, but he's sort of his timing's not quite there, and you saw it in the game against Belleville on Wednesday where he sort of whiffed on a couple of one-timer opportunities, but he's still generating shots. Had a goal and assist in his first few games after coming back. And I think if he can get that timing down and sort of get into game shape, um, the quicker the better for him because there's an opportunity in Montreal right now. I think if he's able to do that, I'm sure the Canadiens would like to give him a look.
Yeah,
Because I think even coming out of training camp, I think they would have liked to have given him a look. So that's it's worth monitoring how Heineman does over the next few games. But again, under the current environment, Laval, it's difficult for him to get up to speed because the team is playing so poorly. And against Belleville, I mean, they were just no shows for the first 40 minutes of that game. I mean, it was just this emotionless. Uh, I mean, JF Poole after the game said it looked like we were a little scared. It looked like we were playing scared, which hearing a coach say that about your team and that's tough. So, and I asked him because as early
but
as the
is it scared because of the opponent? Scared because they're so engulfed into that losing
he
streak?
left it open ended, but I think I got the impression that because he's talked about Belleville before as being kind of a big, intimidating, physical team, and that Laval has not
Yeah,
responded well to that in past games against them because of their youth. So I think he meant scared of the opponent. Like honestly,
yeah.
and yeah, he didn't specify it. This is me interpreting it based on things he said in the past about Belleville and the way they play. Um, but maybe it was a bit of everything. I don't know. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but just for him to
Okay.
say that they were playing scared was pretty significant in my mind.
Mhm.
So back in the rookie tournament in Buffalo, uh, as early as that, JF will, and even earlier, I think, even at development camp, I think JF will said this over the summer, where he was like, "It's going to be tough this year," I specifically remember him in rookie camp saying, "Until Christmas, it's going to be difficult," and I've seen it in the past, but after Christmas, hopefully we'll get there and things will start to turn around for us. So he knew this was coming. And presumably the players knew this was coming, because he said that publicly. I would have to imagine he told it to them too to get ready for this. So then after that game against Belleville, after their eighth straight loss, a game in which they showed no fight, no compete, no cohesion, no pushback, no nothing. I brought this up with him. I said, "Listen, you said before the season, even before your training camp even started, that it was going to be difficult until Christmas, and we're not at Christmas yet. It's coming, but we're not there yet. So are you not? is this not part of the process? Is this not was this not foreseeable? And so he said, yeah, it is part of the process. It was foreseeable, but I said it would be hard until Christmas, and it is. It's hard. It's
Yeah.
like we're in it right now, and it's difficult. So just because I knew, and he didn't say this specifically, but what he meant is like just because I knew it was going to be hard doesn't make it easy. It's hard. I knew it would be hard, and it is. And so when you talk to someone like Heineman, and I'm trying to ask him about his own aspirations, his own development, his own ability to get called up by the Canadiens, the opportunity that's ahead of him, and he couldn't focus on that because it was so difficult to process the way the team was playing and and the losses that were building up. So to get back to that question, that's the side of capacity for prospects that I think is another factor to consider. Like how many young players can you have in Laval and have Laval be an appropriate development environment for these young players? And Joshua Roy was the world was his oyster a month or two, a month and a half ago. Not so much anymore. And
No.
frankly, who called him out after that game as an example of what's difficult about this is that Joshua Roy has shown. No, it's funny because he was answering me in English and he called him Roy. I was like, whoa, that's weird. But anyhow, he's like,
Well,
he's like, for example,
it's like when Claude Julien used to talk about Paul Byron and call him Biron
Miro,
instead of
exactly,
Byron.
yeah, exactly. So he was like, well, you look at a guy like Roy. Like I thought he wasn't very good tonight. He was okay in Abbotsford, but he wasn't very good tonight. So that's part of it. Lack of consistency. Riley Kidney, I thought he was non-existent tonight. He said, aside from that one move, he wasn't there. But he had a good trip in Abbotsford. So if you and Hul talked about this, like when he has so many, and this is why they sent Mishar down to Kitchener. A big reason why, because they had reached a certain capacity. To get back to the question, a certain capacity of young players who were getting used to the American Hockey League, where it was going to be impossible to get them all the appropriate amount of ice time and also place them in an environment that doesn't have to be like a total winning environment. They shouldn't be expected to be dominating the American Hockey League, but they got to compete. They got to be in competitive
Yeah.
games. It can't be just chasing the puck all night over and over and over again. So, I think that's an important consideration here too. When that question is relevant in that sense, because we're seeing it right now in Laval, and let's be clear, there are veterans in Laval and they're not delivering the goods. They lost Mitchell Stevens, who was a big part of that team. But, Gabriel Bourque, Maillet, who you just mentioned, like they have guys. Brady Keeper, who's partnered with Arbor Jackai in that game. Gignac. They have like older guys who are supposed to be sort of regulating the youth of the team who are doing it. But you can't just load your AHL team up with 19 and 20 and 21-year-old prospects and expect it to go fine. Like
Well,
that's
it's funny because it sounds as though it's the extension of what we were talking about earlier about teams that are talented and yet maybe too young at the NHL level,
yeah,
and the benefits of having older guys to have them around them.
yeah,
Because the Laval Rocket could be very well the American League equivalent of the Buffalo Sabres
yeah,
or the Montreal Canadiens to a certain extent. The other day, we mentioned it on the previous episode. Nick Suzuki brought up the fact that they were icing currently the youngest roster, the youngest lineup in the NHL.
yeah.
So it's something that they're acutely aware of, the fact that how young they are. And but there's something though to that effect, because you brought up the name Brendan Gignac, who's knocking at the door, and yet he's a guy who's signed on an American League deal.
Mhm.
So I wonder. It's a sidebar to Heineman, the rest of the conversation, but there's always been. You look at guys like that were in Montreal before or in Laval, whether it's Alex Belzile or before that the what's the name of that Quebec defenseman who left for the Penguins organization? My God, I'm
Xavier
drawing
Ouellet.
Xavier Ouellet.
Yeah,
These guys, even though they were American League players. They never ceased to dream of the NHL. And maybe that Brendan Gignac was not that old. I mean, he was born in 1997. He's still reasonably young,
26. Yeah.
uh, and who's a key player on that team. If he had an NHL deal, personally, he could have that drive of saying, you know what, if I push a bit harder, I could earn a call up. But he can't because he's stuck
Well, I mean,
because
the
of his.
motivation for him is to earn an NHL contract. That's the motivation. Like when the season's over,
Oh, when the
if
season,
not,
sure. When the season's over, yes, but it's not going to happen during the season. Otherwise, 2 years ago they would have given an NHL contract to that goalie who was before they went and acquired Andrew Hammond. They had Kevin Poulin that they could have flipped his contract and
yeah,
just
yeah. But that's Brandon Geniak's reality. I mean, listen,
That's it.
but
That's it. But
that's
when you look, my only point is that when you have guys that are so young and who want to develop the best they can, it's good to have veterans that show the same drive and that have immediate aspirations for better things. And so that's I just find it odd because other if Gignac had an NHL contract, he would have been considered for a call up, just as much as Mitchell Stephens. That's all.
yeah. I don't know. I think all those guys are motivated to make the NHL, and having an NHL contract would make you even more motivated. I don't know. The thing is that you need the Brandon Gignacs, you need the Alex Belzils, you need the Mitchell Stevenses. Like, there's a reason why teams sign these guys every year to play in the
Yeah,
AHL. The reason being that you are currently seeing what happens when uh, when you load your team up in the AHL with younger players. And so that question, we're seeing the answer to that question play out right now in real time in Laval. And I mean, JFO, like, those players are having a hard time with it right now.
mhm.
And being in that dressing room on Wednesday night reminded me of talking to the Anaheim Ducks when they came to Montreal last season. And just the
Yeah,
utter depression in that room, and Mason McTavish saying how it's not fun to play hockey right now, and Trevor
yeah.
Zegras with his cap pulled down and just sounding dead inside
They were
is
dejected
they were,
completely.
and
Oh,
but they came out of it, and now they're not out of it, but they seem to think that they're coming out the other side. At least they're starting to come out the other side. I spoke
yeah,
to Mason McTavish when the Canadiens were in Anaheim, and he was like, "Yeah, like." I was like, "What?" Looking back on it now, that time, because he remembered that conversation that we had. He like, was like, "I talked to you when you guys were in Montreal." I was like, "Yeah, I remember." And I was like, "Do you?" With the benefit of hindsight now, with being able to look back on that, did you get anything out of that experience? He's like, yeah, I know that I never want to do that ever again. Like
wow.
that's the benefit. He's like, I never want to go through something like that ever again. So now we know what it looks like, so that when we see elements of that creeping into our game, we can nip it in the bud sooner because
Hmm.
we never want to go through that ever again. Now listen, maybe there is value to that. Maybe there is something that a young player can take from that and propel them forward, but that is one hell of a negative experience. And for someone like Mason McTavish, who's a hockey junkie, to say hockey wasn't fun anymore, and it's becoming it's fun again now. 82 games is a long time to have hockey not be fun, and you don't know how different players are going to react to that. It really depends on your internal makeup, and so extending that to the AHL level, when you're a 19-year-old kid or a 20-year-old kid, you've always been a dominant player in your league up until that point. Suddenly you're getting pushed around. You can't stay on your ski. The physicality of the league. is jarring. You know, I mean, Boko Imama on Wednesday night was just running roughshod all over the ice. Like honestly, like the guy
Yeah,
was
Jacky was there, but he was the sheriff, right?
yeah. Jack guy
Yeah.
wanted no part of that or was told not to take any part of that. And
Yeah.
I don't think there would have been any benefit in really fighting the guy other than to say stop running my guys, you know, and but you could see the impact like it, you know, guys like Wah, like Kidney, like you know, Nishak to some extent. I mean, it's intimidating and it can be a tough.
Farrell. Oh, Farrell's out.
Farrell wasn't playing. Yeah, Farrell's
Yeah,
out, but
Farrell's out.
it's
Yeah.
um. So yeah, I think that there's a limit to how many of your young guys you can put in the AHL, and but just to get back to your point with the draft picks, 100% that I think people should look at those picks more so as trade capital than draft capital at this point. It's the upcoming picks over the next two drafts
Hmm.
provide the Canadians with a tremendous amount of trade capital.